Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war kind of breaking news. It did break sort of last night, but this is my first chance to sort of talk about it, and that is the 18th EU sanctions package against Russia. It's incredibly important, although sadly there isn't unity between the EU and the US. We'll talk about that in a little while with regard to some of these sanctions, the oil price cap particularly. Andriy Yermak, head of the president's office, lays out the main aspects of this sanctions package. We're going to look in a little bit more detail after this at some, particularly some areas concerning the oil price cap. So Andriy Yermak says at the ambassadorial level, the EU has just approved the 18th package of sanctions against Russia. The key measures include a ban on all transactions related to Nord Stream 1 and 2, the final end to the illusion about the future. So if you remember, the Americans had been recently interested in resurrecting Nord Stream pipelines, which I found quite odd because actually that means you're going to get gas flowing into Europe from Russia, but actually the Americans should be interested in having an alternative to Russian hydrocarbons in the form of American LNG. And America's exports of LNG have gone through the roof since the Europeans have cut down on their reliance on Russian gas. So it's odd that some people from over there have been trying to talk about the Nord Stream pipelines being resurrected. Obviously, they might be individuals or corporations that are particularly interested in the gas pipelines as opposed to LNG. There might be, it's not like all Americans are all for LNG. There will be other Americans that will be involved in gas transportation pipelines and whatever. But anyway, there was a real worry that the Trump administration might try, and even though he was like dead against Nord Stream, that there were elements connected to the Trump administration that might try and resurrect Nord Stream pipelines. And so the Europeans have sought to put an end to that. And they've done this from this sanctions package. Price cap on Russian oil. We'll talk about that in more detail in a second. 105 more tankers from the Russian shadow fleet being sanctioned, a direct hit on the sanction evasion schemes. Total import ban on oil products made from Russian crude oil. Sanctions on the Russian Direct Investment Fund, which is a blow to the Kremlin's elite. Full SWIFT ban for 22 more Russian banks. So SWIFT is the international payment system that is integral in stopping Russia being able to do all of this financial activity. However, the Russians are trying to get around that with the use of cryptocurrency at the moment. But anyway, Yermak says that effectively cuts off financial transactions. So another 22 Russian banks hit there. Ban on financial operators in third countries who help Russia circumvent sanctions. Export restrictions worth over 2.5 billion euros. Critical industrial goods and technology will no longer reach Russia. 22 entities, both Russian and foreign, aiding Russia's military industrial complex will be sanctioned, and sanctions on individuals involved in the ideological indoctrination of Ukrainian children in Russia. This is all really good news. This is supposed to be one of the harshest packages that the EU has put forward. The issue for there being a lack of unity might look something like this. And I'm no expert on this, but I imagine that the more you sanction as an individual, so imagine you are one country out of 100 countries, right? And you sanction another one of those countries, right? And you go to town saying, right, you're not allowed to use any of, say I'm Great Britain. Right, and on my own, I'm going to sanction the hell out of Russia. Let's use a real world example. I'm just going to say, right, you can't use any of our banking system to do transactions. We're not going to allow insurance of your maritime fleet. You're not going to do this. We're going to stop this from being sold through the UK. Blah blah blah. And you put all of these sanctions on Russia, and that's all good and well as far as the UK is concerned. You think, right, as the UK, we've done the right thing. But then, if no other country does that, then you lose business out to the other countries who go, well, if you're not going to allow your banking system to do financial transactions with Russia, then we'll just, Russia will say, well, we're going to use the banking systems of this country. And then the other countries will be like, yeah, we're going to make money off that. And so on and so forth. And so what happens is, as a UK, you would end up losing out. So although you said, well done us, we put sanctions on Russia, screw you, Russia. Russia's like, well, it's not too bad because there are loads of alternatives there. And actually those countries then pick up the business that you're losing in the UK. So what you need for sanctions to be A, effective, and B, not to punish you as an entity, is you need everyone to do them. Now, the EU, this is a really, really good thing. But if you don't have unity with the US, then you're going to lose business out. You say, right, we're not going to allow this to happen. You can't sell these bits and pieces to Russia. Anyone within the EU cannot do this. And someone in the US is like, well, we're not sanctioned. The US doesn't sanction us. So all that stuff that you were selling from the EU to Russia, we're going to pick up that business now. Thank you very much. So the US conveys a competitive advantage over the EU by not doing sanctions, and Russia keeps being able to do whatever it wants to do. So sanctions are effective more effective when everyone does them. It is going to hurt Russia a bit, but it will probably hurt the EU at a time when we don't want to be hurt, or Europe doesn't want to be hurt. And so you need the UK to say, right, we're going to follow along with the sanctions. You need Canada to say we're going to follow along that sanctions package. Australia, Japan, and the US. And we're going to talk about the US in a little bit of detail. Okay, so Reuters reports EU approves a new sanctions package with a lower oil price cap. Right, so far, Russia has managed to sell most of its oil above previous price caps, as the current mechanism makes it unclear who must police its implementation, and traders doubt the new EU sanctions will significantly disrupt Russian oil trade. The package also has a ban on transactions related to Russia's Nord Stream gas pipelines under the Baltic Sea and on Russia's financial sector. Okay, so there's that. But then when we come down to here, Reuters says US declines to back Europe on the price cap. And this is where it gets a little bit annoying. So the European Union and Britain have been pushing to lower the price cap for the last 2 months after a fall in oil futures made the current level of $60 a barrel largely irrelevant. In other words, the price has gone down anyway, so you need to move it further. But the United States has resisted leaving the EU to move forward on its own. So, okay, good, the EU is moving on its own, but then the US is not following through. But without real power to enforce the measure, analysts and oil traders say. As the dollar dominates global oil transactions and the US financial institutions play the central role in clearing payments, the EU has no means to block trades by denying access to dollar clearing. Agreement on the new EU package was held up for weeks as Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico demanded concessions on a separate plan to phase out EU dependence on Russian oil and gas. Fico announced on Thursday night that he was ending his opposition, so that was last night. Countries such as Greece, Cyprus and Malta had also expressed concerns about the effect of the oil price cap on their shipping industries. But Malta, the last of the trio to hold out, came on board also on Thursday. So these countries, heavily dependent with huge shipping entities, Malta, Cyprus, Greece, all of those countries really do help out Russia quite a lot. In fact, the Greece shipping fleet largely switched over, or a large number of ships switched over from being Greek ships at the beginning of the war to being shadow fleet tankers halfway through the war. So, Greece has been indirectly facilitating Russia's ability to make money still. So they're always going to put up a lot of resistance to this because it's going to hurt them in the pocket. And there'll be a lot of oligarchs and rich people who will be lobbying and whatnot. But yeah, it's just that lack of unity. Sanctions work best when everyone bloody does them. Of course they do. Euractiv, and I'm actually going to read this out because it gives us a pretty good sense of what's going on here. EU agrees a revised Russia oil price cap as part of the 18th sanctions package. The breakthrough came as Slovakia lifted its week-long veto last night, paving the way for the bloc's newest package of economic punishment on Russia. So EU member states on Friday agreed to impose a new round of sanctions against Russia, which will now include significantly lowered Russian oil price cap and a range of new financial and trade measures. The breakthrough came after Slovakia lifted their veto. Bratislava and its Russia-friendly Prime Minister Fico had used its veto power to pressure the European Commission to relent on a proposed phase-out of all Russian fossil fuels by late 2027, which it argued would endanger domestic energy security. Quote, "We will keep raising the costs So stopping the aggression becomes the only path forward for Moscow, EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas said, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU was striking at the heart of Russia's war machine. Of course, one wonders what the concessions to Slovakia, Cyprus, Malta, Greece might well have been. A key element of the package greenlighted by the EU ambassadors on Friday is a new dynamic oil price cap mechanism, which would set the price on Russian oil exported to third countries to 15% lower than the average market price of Russian crude oil. This means the price will now be lowered from $60 to approximately $47.60 per barrel and is subject to review every 6 months to adapt to changing market prices, according to diplomatic sources. The G7 price cap was originally agreed in December 2022 by the G7 countries and aims to prevent Russia from financing the war in Ukraine. EU officials said they hope to get the rest of the G7 countries, so this is the importance of the EU is doing this, they need to get, as I mentioned, Canada, Japan, UK and the United States on board. So far, the Trump administration has not supported the price revision. The previous Biden administration had been a key driver of the overall cap idea. Brussels still hopes to get other partners on board, but was said that even without others, the price cap review significantly impacts Russia's war chest. So the new package adds 105 new listings, so ships, of the so-called Russian shadow fleet vessels, which Moscow has used to bypass the price cap. Now the number of banned vessels stands at over 400. It further introduces a ban on transactions with 22 Russian banks. The 18th round of sanctions also includes a new transaction ban relating to the gas pipelines Nord Stream 1 and 2, which have not been operational since 2022 to prevent the maintenance, operation or any future use of those pipelines. The new sanctions further restrict Moscow's access to dual-use technology by adding 26 new entities engaged in supplying Russia's military-industrial complex. Those include 11 companies in third countries, 7 from China, including 3 from Hong Kong, and 4 in Turkey, and a Russian-owned refinery in India, according to diplomatic sources. So hopefully this will have the desired effect. It will be mitigated somewhat in its effect by a lack of unity. I hope that if the US doesn't come on board, then at least the other G7 nations do. I'm pretty sure Britain will, and I think that Canada would as well. And you'd hope the others too, Japan too. But yeah, good news. This is what we've been waiting for. Slovakia and Malta have been annoyingly holding out, so it's good that they have fallen into place. Although, as I say, I wonder what the concessions were to them. And let's hope that this hinders, that this really badly affects the already beleaguered Russian economy, which is suffering at the moment. It is definitely suffering. All the indicators are looking bad, and they are all getting worse for the Russian economy. And this will hopefully be a nail in the coffin, so that this war will finally come to an end. And I've often said that, well, I always have said that it has to end, I think, financially or economically for the Russians first. I think the military success of the Ukrainians is contingent upon an economic success against the Russians. So this is super, super important. Anyway, let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.